And we are live. Welcome to the show, people. Marcus BC of Das Gooch here. Today I'll be interviewing the one, the only George Glass.
Hello, all. Thanks for having me on, Marcus.
Oh, no problem, no problem. George, this is the second episode of this podcast. It's still bare bones, still kind of shitty, but we're going to work through it. We're going to get better at it. I'm going to get better at it eventually, hopefully, maybe. I've already popped my cherry yesterday. I popped my cherry. It's my second time. I should be ready on this one.
Well, I'm happy to be a test subject for you.
All right, that's the spirit. That's the spirit. Generally on this podcast, since this is the second episode, we focus on subjects like your beginnings, what inspires you, like what kind of things have you been writing? What was the first thing you ever wrote, and that kind of thing, We'll be working on that. So I just want to start off with talking about just like describing yourself, but at the same time keeping your anonymity, because that's the one thing that's important for us writers of this genre, is to keep of this, not genre, but of fan fiction and stuff, to keep anonymity. So please, what can you tell the viewers about George Glass?
Well, in my real life, I'm a professional editor, and I chose the name George Glass because, well, this dates me somewhat, but I was always a fan of the girls from the Brady Bunch, and George Glass, some may remember, was Jan's imaginary boyfriend. And I thought that seemed like a perfect name for me as I embarked on this anonymous fan fiction writing track that I've been on for a few years now.
All
Uh,
right. That's great. I mean, from what I've read, and I've read like a lot of your work. I've read your original work, a lot of your original work. I've read a lot of your, like, one story that's coming to mind was your Susie story from Phineas and Ferb. Like, God, that was legendary. I feel like that's a legendary story, and
well,
should.
thank you.
I mean, that story like is amazing. But so how long totally have you been like specifically, how long have you been writing? Because it seems to me you have a lot of experience. I'm going to go on a limb and say like 10, 15 years maybe.
Well, writing fiction, it's been on and off. Many years ago, I had a sort of previous life under a different name, writing fan fiction for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was largely not erotic. Uh, and then I sort of fell off of that for quite a long time. And then a few years ago, I joined a site called Cub Central, which was for basically young furry uh, fan fiction and art and original material as well. And that site is sort of dormant now. It still exists, but nobody really posts to it. But it got me interested in trying to write again, and I found myself writing a fan fiction about Wily Kid and Wily Cat from the original Thundercats series,
Ooh.
and that's really how I got started in it. Uh, and then I wrote a couple of original furry pieces as well, but it was taking me a very long time. I was finishing maybe one story a year, and I kind of uh, I kind of kept up that pace for probably 3 years or so, and then a couple of years ago, I suddenly had this idea for a Phineas and Ferb story because I had become a fan of that show and their whole I know what we're going to do today, and how they always they'll find any little thing and embrace it and turn it into something huge. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if they found an old porn movie and then decided to make their own? And in a sense, that would be completely in character for them because they're extremely precocious. So it seemed sensible that they would be precocious in a sexual sense as well, and yet they have a completely innocent, enthusiastic approach to things, and that's how they would go about making their porn movie. And so I ended up writing. And after a while, this story, even though I just thought of it as a joke initially. It just kept writing itself in my head. And so that's how I ended up producing Rated F, a Phineas and Ferb sex comedy. And that's what really got me started in this sort of role that I'm on now.
All right. So would you say, like, can I ask you, would you say Phineas and Ferb is like your main, your niche basically? Is that your like one of your larger focuses? Because like similar to me, my large focus as a member of Das Gooch, mostly I focused on the Amazing World of Gumball, not because I so much enjoyed the show. I mean, I've watched the show, I watched the show in passing, but before I actually started writing fan fiction, I just wrote strictly erotica. I mean, David, one of the founding members of Das Gooch, asked me, "Hey, Marcus, why don't you try writing fan fiction?" And I was like, what could I like? Why would I want to do that? It's because he specifically said that you could try, all you have to do is take your erotica and basically meld it to a certain characters, and you gotta try to keep those characters informed because it'll be a challenge for you. That's what he said. It'll be a challenge for you, and it was a challenge for me when I started. Um, but when I started with the series Quickies, which is like it's an episodical series. It's not, none of the episodes necessarily follow each other unless it's like a part two or something. But it's basically a combination of just quick one shot quickies, basically. One shot erotica stories. You got, and it was like I posted that on fanfiction under Das Gooch and on fanfiction.net, and it exploded. I think it exploded because the Amazing World of Gumball section of fanfiction.net had, when I joined, it was like 15 stories. I was literally dubbed the pervy uncle of the Amazing World of Gumball on fan. Like people, it even got to the point where it stroked my ego the way that people just like the read and were like, oh man, it stroked my ego that I literally said, I really dimed the quote rated M for Das Gooch, basically. It wasn't rated M for Das, it's basically rated M for Das Gooch. And that's what really I got, that's my niche. But from there I've actually branched into Invader Zim because I started a story back in 2011 called Invader Zim Defect No More. It was gonna be kind of similar to Quickies, except it's gonna have a little bit more plot and just pure erotica. But I scrapped that because I was like, oh, I'm just not getting inspired. And jump 4 years later, I've rebooted it and it's become like popular and stuff. So would you say, back to the main question, would you say that Phineas and Ferb is your niche, like is your main focus?
It's certainly my go-to fandom. Uh, More so than anything else. I mean, I've done a couple of Thundercats stories. I'm doing, God help me, I'm doing a Frozen story. But Phineas and Ferb, it just seems to inspire me most of any of the fandoms that I've written
All right, let's go back to that the Frozen stories because
in. Oh dear.
I've been paying attention to your updates on adult fan fiction. You come out with what is it called? You come out with a few. You come out with, if I can find it,
Well, the
Queen for a
Frozen
Day.
story is titled "In the Light of Day," a Frozen epic, and maybe it's self-aggrandizing to have put epic in the title, but I felt when I started it that this was going to be something long with a lot of characters and a lot of subplots and and a big finish. And so that's what I'm trying for. And this was another one of those things that I really didn't want to write, but it made me write it.
We cannot control our muses.
Not always.
All right, so would you like to give a quick summary of this story for people who may want to read this, or read this story? What's the story following? What's the story about? I mean,
The story is intended as a sort of sequel to the movie. It involves Elsa is persuaded to invite 7 princes to the kingdom of Arendelle to vie for her hand as prince consort. In other words, they would not be king if they married her. They would be married to her, but they would have a sort of a lower station. They would not rule Arendelle. And of course, this decision is the result of her sister almost or marrying the wrong man, and the resultant near disaster from that. And so, of course, these 7 princes show up, and it turns out none of them is Prince Charming. They all have their drawbacks, but the most interesting of them, although the one whom she dislikes most and who she has a with whom she has a sort of mutual antipathy, is Prince Rajiv, who is from the kingdom of Sundara, which I imagine is somewhere in southern India. And he has he and really a lot of the other characters have secrets that are gradually revealed in the course of the story, because someone is up to something nefarious.
Isn't it always with these sort of like medieval freaking like shows, and something's always going on. Nothing is ever just like a peaceful, oh, let me rule this. It's somebody's always in the background scheming and conniving and
Well, I guess that's why they call it plot.
exactly. So would you say that somebody would need to like know of the movie or to watch the movie to understand your story, like, and then not be like totally lost, or would
It
you?
would it would help, but I think a person could probably read a paragraph long synopsis of the movie and be able to follow the story, because a lot of the characters in the story are original. They're not from the movie, so I mean the movie really only has a few main characters. Uh, so there's not that much background to each of them.
All right, all right. Can I ask you what? I don't know if I asked this question previously, but with Fairy Slayer. But can I ask you what is your genre and or style or like for instance, my example, mine is I'm predominantly a dark humor writer. I write like humor, dark humor, tragedy, not so good. Like things don't. There's no for my stories. There are no like. There's no happy. I mean, for a lot of it, there's no happy like. Oh, we'll live happily ever after. I mean, for instance, for one of my the Amazing World of Gumball's quickies, I had Gumball. For my universe of Gumball, Gumball is a basically amateur photographer, and he decides to start himself a business. Basically, he takes the girls from his like school and the high school above him, and he basically creates a digital Playboy bunny type thing and sells it to people in his like town to make money. And because it's underground, because it's illegal, basically, he can charge exorbitant fees.
Ah.
So yeah, so when Rachel, who is the older sister of Tobias, the puffy cloud boy, comes to her because she's having problems at home. She's having problems at home because her mother's maxed out all the credit cards, and her father lost his job, so they're in heavy debt. Her father leaves, and her mother has no idea what she's gonna do, and she's drinking herself. She keeps maxing out the credit cards because she's just addicted to fucking shopping. She has to find a way to make money. So Rachel finds out from another girl that Gumball is offering money if in exchange for services. Basically, what she assumes was just photography, some photo shoots, 1 or 2 photo shoots, and it's done. And so when she arrives there, Gumball immediately jumps onto it, and like you said, he has her. He's like he sees what the state that she's in, and like one of his earlier comments are like, "Oh, you're showing up like that? Do you really want to do this?" type thing going on. So she's nervous, of course, and she goes off and changes, and they start the photo shoot. And he starts asking more serious and questions, and more starts getting kind of handsy and stuff. She's not comfortable, and he's getting kind of annoyed that she keeps persisting and stuff. So he basically trying to call it off. She freaks out because she's really desperate for the money, and and so in the end, he actually gets to test the goods. Test the goods. He does video and thing, and he actually what's it called when they're in coitus, and when their coitus is about finished, he does his business inside of her, and she can't, because that's a bad day. It was like, how women, they have bad days, like not good
Mhm.
days to, because they're like within their cycle, they're like,
Yes.
it's like
Very.
the day to be the most fertile. So she's like crying and like doesn't know, because she's probably gonna get paid. So like when he pays her, he's supposed to pay her just like $200, but he throws in an extra 200 in the end when she asks what's the extra 200 for. He replies nonchalantly with a freaking big ass smile. Oh, for the abortion, of course. And then
Mm.
that's the story ends. That's the kind of writing that I do. I do like blackmail, dark humor type things. So that's kind of what the example I was talking about. What would your like genre or niche be? Like, what would your writing style or focus be in your stories?
I honestly don't feel that I have one. And I think part of the reason why I have written so many stories of different types is that I'm always interested in exploring different genres, different levels of light and dark. Uh, you mentioned my Susie Johnson story earlier, Little Blonde Monster, which I wrote deliberately because every Phineas and Ferb story I had written up to that point was kind of sweet and funny, and I wanted to break away from that and try doing something darker in the world of Phineas and Ferb. And I was actually, you mentioned yesterday with Fairy Slayer, you talked to him about his story Candy Little Girl, which I had read, or I read what of it he's written up to this point, and that, although I found it deeply disturbing, it also made me think, well, what if I wanted to do a dark story in this uh, in this universe of Phineas and Ferb? How would I do that, and how would I do it in a way that I and that readers would find plausible? And that was when I thought of little Susie Johnson, our tiny psychopath, and that and her bizarre obsession with her brother, which I could easily see as having a sexual basis. And next thing you know, I'm writing about her, molesting her brother while he sleeps, and all her twisted fantasies of how she wants to be with him, and the lengths that she'll go to make that happen, and of course the horrible things she'll do in order to get Candace Flynn out of the way to make that happen.
Like, do you think? And let me ask you a question. Do you think that when the writers are writing for these, like, and coming up with these cartoons and stuff like that they think that, oh man, if somebody's probably gonna twist the hell out of this fucking show and just make something horrible. Like the writers, like specifically, like that's a good example would be Adventure Time. Adventure Time is a very like it's more of a I think it aims for an audience of a more older audience, not so much just for small children. And it has a lot of potential and innuendos for all sorts of like dirty, dirty, dirty things. But do you think like the creators of these shows ever think about, oh, somebody might write some erotica fan fiction about this or something?
I think they at least consider that viewers will extrapolate from what they're seeing, because they know that adults are watching these shows as well, and that's why they put in, in the case of Phineas and Ferb and Steven Universe, and probably a dozen other cartoons out there, jokes that children are simply not going to get. They're really aimed at the parents who are watching with their children. And I think at the same time, the writers know that, yeah, there are going to be people who might well interpret this in a way that the 9-year-old target audience does not. I don't know what they expect in the way of fan fiction, but I think in this day and age they have to be able to expect anything in the way of fan fiction. People will take the slimmest premise and for something twisted and expand on it.
Oh yeah, because I think I watched, I don't know what the Amazing World of Gumball episode that got me like, oh, I'm going to write about this type thing. I don't know what how I get my inspiration for like my Amazing World of Gumball stories or like one shots is I do a lot of Rule 34. If I can get
Mm.
hooked onto like a Rule 30, if I can find like a good Rule 34 picture, and for those in the audience who don't know what Rule 34 is, Rule 34 is basically the rule of Rule 34 states that if it exists in a a believable manner, there's porn out there of it somewhere on the internet. It's like one of those things that will forever be like death and taxes. You can't just there's death and taxes. There's Rule 34. And when I went online and like got on the Amazing World of Gumball, found I found like inspiration. There's just one picture. I think that one of the first episodes of my thing was there was a picture of Nicole, Gumball's mom, and like Banana Joe, and like I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but it's like it's I'll try to put a link in the let me see if I can do it. Find I have to I'm gonna put a link in there, but it is nuts. It is it that picture like instantly shot. Oh, there's my inspiration type thing going on there,
Hmm.
and that led me to write about Banana Joe. Basically, Banana in a tight spot was one of the, the episodes. Basically, I took Nicole's like personality. She's very very like controlling and like serious, and she has her mood swings and stuff like that. And the premise of the story was basically it was after an episode where like Gumball gets like teased at school until so his mom has to be called up to the school, and she basically singles out Banana Joe and basically traps him in an alleyway. And Banana Joe is small and tiny, so his only defense mechanism really is to just jump at his attackers. And most of the time, his attackers are younger, shorter, smaller people. So when he jumps at her, he he basically hits a target that he never really was meant to hit, and kind of finds himself in a tight spot. So that was basically the inspiration, and it really went downhill from there, man. It was story after story, more inspiration. I had people like telling me like, oh, at request for this and that and stuff like that. It is basically that. So let's talk about since we're on the topic of like cartoons and stuff like that. What are your like? Do you have like a top 5 favorite cartoons of all time? Top thing on for you
Well,
or?
of all time, that's an interesting one. Well, obviously, I was a big fan of the original Thundercats, and I enjoyed the newer version that was around briefly last year. Uh, that was really what got me into the whole furry genre. I think was that when I was a teenager, Chichara aroused certain feelings in me, and Wild Kit as well to some extent, and um, that would be one. Phineas and Ferb, obviously. I'm really enjoying Steven Universe right now. Not just because it's entertaining and funny, but it seems to have serious subtext to it. There is a lot of some lesbian relationships that are really not it's almost not subtext anymore. Uh, at this point, there's one character who is a fusion of two beings who are in love, and all the crystal gems in their universe are female. So uh, it's this woman is the embodiment of a relationship between two other women, and that's really interesting to me.
Oh yeah, that doesn't that does like if they really made like like as you say they can't possibly be surprised that people won't pounce on that and come up with their own ideas and like lesbian stuff like that. Because I think I watched a few episodes of Steven Universe. I liked it. I liked it so far. It was kind of it's kind of it was entertaining for me. But I don't, me personally, I don't really watch a lot of cartoons anymore. So I spend most of my time either really this my day mostly spends most of my time playing. If I'm not at school or doing like some kind of college related activity or something like that, I'm either reading fan fiction, writing fan
Well, that sounds like a better use of your time anyway.
cartoons after like I started watching cartoons actually after Ed and Eddie ended like in 2011.
Hmm.
Like I around that time they stopped showing Ed and Eddie and stopped because not so much because I didn't enjoy it, because I just didn't have time. I just didn't have the time, didn't have the thing, and I didn't really need to constantly watch cartoons to find inspiration. I can just say, oh, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna write this, and that was fine for me. But yeah, so you're saying like Thundercats, Steven Universe. What else? You got three. You got your three. You
Um,
got three more to go.
I was
Like,
I was a fan of the Replacements on the Disney Channel, um, particularly because of Agent K, their hot mom. Uh, I I of course like most people on Earth watched The Simpsons for a decade or two.
oh, yeah, don't even get me started on Lisa Simpson. Oh, Lisa Simpson. Lisa Simpson.
There are oddly, I've been finding myself watching a little bit of Wander Over Yonder lately. Just
Wander over
because,
yonder. I think I don't know much about that show. Is it the guy with the banjo?
yes, that's him. And I think the chief reason I find that show appealing is that Wander has this sort of relentless optimism that's very much like Phineas's. Uh, and he's paired with someone who does not have that, who has kind of a strong baseline level of hostility, much like Candace from Phineas and Ferb. So there, I see certain parallels between the shows. But God help me, I have no plans to write any Wander Over Yonder porn.
I mean, it wouldn't be so bad. It'd be a first because I've never actually read one. But it'd be a first. Like I feel like I feel similar to that. Have you ever heard of a show? It was shown mostly in Australia. I don't know if it actually showed. There actually was a lot of controversy surrounding this cartoon. It's called Shizao.
I think I've heard of it.
Shizao, in layman's term, was a cross-dressing superhero. Like I kid you not, I could not make this shit up. It was about a guy and his sister. I think they were twins. They could have been. They could be twins. And their great aunt was like a superhero, and they're messing around in their attic, and the boy finds a ring, and he puts it on. And he like, the superhero ring is not meant for guys, so when he puts it on, they dress him up in like high socks. Scary, you cannot make this crap up in a wig and everything. So he fights crime in like drag using like freaking horrible one like catchphrases, and it's just like but that's like the one bad thing I hate about the show. Like she zousas and a freaking girl. I was like it was lame, but it was very controversial. People went nuts about that. Like the moms, whatever organization in Australia went absolutely freaking bonkers about that. And
Hmm.
I kind of looked at it, was like, this is it's definitely gonna be like a big thing. And when the show was announced, I went on a Rule 34 like literally 2 days after it was announced, and there was crap already there for it. It's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be big. This is gonna be big. Like, something's gonna be big up on in the erotica section if Rule 34 already came out
Yes,
for
if
it. And another show I looked at recently. Yeah, but like another show I looked at recently on demand a few times. I do watch cartoons or watch TV. Period. Is Harvey Beaks. Now, I
Hmm.
don't know if you've ever heard of Harvey Beaks. It's this project by the same guy who worked for Cartoon Network, who created Chowder. Now, I love Chowder. Chowder is one of the favorite shows. It was a great show. It was about a fat like bear, cat, rabbit combination animal thing. It was really fucking awesome. So I'm watching this Harvey Beaks, and it's about this boy who's like the most innocent freaking creature. He's like, he's not so much innocent. He's like good. He's just a good guy. I mean, he's like courteous and good stuff like that. And he's friends with these two twins who are like the complete opposite. They're rambunctious. They're gross. They like it's retarded. They're like animals. So I'm thinking like, oh yeah, easy story premise is A. Easy story premise could be easily all right. Harvey the twins are up to like what twins do. Twins they have their little secret thing. They bring Harvey into it, who's like I don't know if I should be doing this. And like
Hmm.
oh don't and like twins I don't be a pussy and he gets dragged into it and it explodes and it's that could have been an easy story premise right there. But if you have free time, just go check out a couple episodes of Harvey Beats. I swear to God, you're gonna come up with some kind of inspiration for another story.
I'll have to give that a look.
All right, so finishing up your list because we keep getting sidetracked. I'm just looking to talk about cartoons. Finishing up your list, what would the remaining like favorites? Dexter's Laboratory be on that list?
Hmm. I did watch Dexter's Laboratory when it came out. I don't know if it would be on my list of favorites. Uh, Chiefly because I just never found Dexter all that compelling a character. Um, in fact, he and his sister Dee Dee sort of seem to fall into that same formula of the kind of the nervous Nelly and the troublemaker. And the troublemaker creates plot for the nervous Nelly to freak out about. And I just feel like this is a trope that I've seen in a lot of cartoons to the point that it's just kind of stale for me. Um,
True.
the
I watched Dexter's Laboratory because I'm 21, so I'm not. So I'm of the Y generation who I would call Cartoon Network's golden generation.
mm,
They brought in like a whole bunch of like artists and story writers from freaking UCLA, and then they brought in the Russian guy Jindy Tartakovsky to come in, and that whole generation where you had like Samurai Jack and Dexter's Laboratory and stuff like that. That I feel like that was the Cartoon Network's golden age where they had like 12 different cartoons like Johnny Bravo and stuff on air, and they were like high rated. They were getting views. Ed, Ed and Eddie was like one of the longest running shows and one of those. I'm pretty sure it's one of the top five most popular shows on Cartoon Network in Cartoon Network history.
mm.
And
Oh,
those were excellent days, man. They were excellent days.
I did just think of another one that's in my personal top five, Futurama.
Futurama, yeah, I go watch Futurama. I mean, Futurama, it kind of had its like, I don't know if it was trying to be like a mixture of like Family Guy in the future or something. I don't know, but it was. I felt
Maybe The Simpsons in the future.
The Simpsons in the future.
But yeah, I see what you mean. Um, I liked it mostly because there were a lot of really geeky references. I think one of my favorite jokes in the show was someone made a comment about some how they had just watched something happen with some quantum device, and the professor says, "They don't. You changed it by observing it." I
Oh
got a
man,
good nerd laugh.
I remember that one. I think it was like one episode where I think it was in either. Oh god, what was that freaking episode? But they got like, oh geez, it was hilarious. I think it was the one where they got like gender switched or something like that for a bit.
Oh yes.
And then there was the one where like they spoofed Back to the Future and like freaking what's the freaking main character of Futurama's name?
Fry.
Fry. Yeah, Fry sleeps with his own grandmother or something like that.
Yes, and becomes his own grandfather.
The professor called him an idiot, like you freaking
You ignorant dope.
you're your own grandfather. He kills his grandfather, or the guy who was supposed to be his grandfather, by
Yes,
sending him into an atomic testing site.
yes. And
Uh,
then later, this turns out to be an important plot point when turns out that becoming his own grandfather has altered the way his brain works and makes him immune to this the attack of these flying alien brains. And when he's told about this by the friendly aliens, he said, "Well, I did do the nasty and the pasty."
the nasty and the pasty. Have you thought about doing any kind of Back to the Future reference stories? Because I did one. What the fuck was it called? The Time Machine. That was Amazing World of Gumball. Basically, Gumball, who is pretty much a pervert in my universe. He tries to get good with the science nerd girls who he has never been able to get good with. So he says the best way he could think of ever doing that was basically breaking into Bobbert's, like the basically the robot kid freaking like locker, and stealing something to use. And his dumbass finds a time machine that he thinks is a weather watch or whatever like that. I don't know why he thought it was a weather watch. But he gets basically sent back to 1985. And he gets and accidentally sleeps with his mother, who hit him with a freaking moped and nursed him back to health, and that went downhill, and he slept. And he didn't click in his brain that this was his mother until after he had fired off his shot. And because he was like he kept on adding A, but he couldn't connect B. He said, these pancakes kind of taste like my mother's pancakes. And this person looks extremely familiar. And your name's Nicole. It should have clicked immediately, but all the blood had rushed from his head.
Away from the brain.
Yeah. So he freaks out and tries to flee, and you know how Nicole, she's not gonna be nobody's one night stand. So the story kind of the mixture of Back to the Future and Crank. I don't know if you ever heard of Crank, but with Jason Statham. It's like a hilarious movie to watch. You need to go watch Crank. Basically, because the time machine was not made for humans. It was made for the robot. That way he could power it via his own circuits and stuff like that. So he needs to find electricity. He needs to power the watch with electricity via skin-on-skin contact, because the watch will absorb any electricity that basically hits him. Instead of harming him, it's going to go on the watch. So he has to figure out ways to basically juice himself up from a car battery, which he takes the jumper cables and sticks it on his tongue and his nipple, and basically stops himself from. He has to use car battery. He has to use friction. It's nuts. And basically, it ends up with him at this power plant, which I call it's fictional, but I don't know if it exists. The Northwestern Bell power plant, located in Washington, and all my stories are located in the state of Washington for some strange reason. And he has to break into this highly secured government power facility, whatever like that. He breaks in, and Nicole breaks in, and she starts beating everybody's ass because she's Nicole. So they think it's a terrorist attack. So when they basically find Gumball, who's finally made it after having to climb up a freaking elevator chute, he actually finds it, and just as he's about to touch the power source, he gets shot. He gets shot, and he gets sent back into the future, which has changed horribly. And the season ends there, but I haven't even worked on the second season yet.
I see.
But that's basically. Have you worked on any kind of time machine stories like that, or no? No.
I have, in fact, I wrote an original story that was about communication across time. It's called Backward Glance. And it is a romance told in journal format. And we get the story from the woman's point of view. starting from when she's a child all the way up through graduate school and her career beyond, and how she and this guy she's known since she was little seemed possibly right for each other, but things always just sort of went wrong. They always kind of made mistakes and ended up being hostile toward each other when in fact they liked each other. And the man eventually ends up dead, and the woman who becomes a physicist becomes involved with a secret NSA project called Backward Glance, and she volunteers to be the first test subject. And what this enables her to do is to communicate with her past self at particular periods of time and to alter certain events that she feels were the ones that led them down the wrong path. And so when in the second part of the story we go back and see the whole story again, this time from the man's point of view, but seeing it as it has been changed through the woman's intervention.
All right, let's talk about your original stories, because writing an original story, I feel, frees you up. It basically gives you a blank slate to just do whatever the hell you want. And I've read a lot of your original stories, and they are quite interesting. If I could name a couple, let's see. I'm trying to think of a wish list. Wish list was I don't know if you remember that one, but it's basically, of
course,
Wish list got me. Then Darla's dad, Darla. Then what was it? I don't know. Sometimes you get the bear. And like, oh crap, Satisfaction. Like a lot of these stories, I see the interview. Like a lot of these stories seem to have the same. Not so much the. They have a oh crap. What's the one I'm looking for? They have a sort of a similar premise. Not like, for instance, a lot of your stories have like a woman, and she kind of like dominates, or not so much dominates, but it's a woman and like a younger man or something like that, or it's
I certainly have written my share of straight Shota type stories. Most recently, A Beach Like No Other, which was inspired by the art of Glassfish. I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but she is a wonderful straight Shota artist. And her cartoons always depict young boys with extremely voluptuous adult women, and I found that very compelling. And I wrote to her and asked if she would support my writing a short story based, not based on any particular work of hers, but sort of inspired by her work in general. And she seemed to like that idea, and so I only just recently finished the fourth and final chapter of it. But I'm kind of all over the place in terms of the ages of the characters and who is in control and all of that. I mean, certainly Darla and Darla's dad. Darla has no control at all. She's a victim throughout the entire thing. Those are the kinds of stories that I write when I'm in a very particular mood. The same goes for Caitlin's punishment and side effects. But I will confess that sometimes I find it very. I have sort of an interest in female characters who lose control of themselves, maybe not merely in a sexual way, but maybe also of their anger or of some other passion that they can no longer control. That was definitely a theme in Side Effects and in one of the furry stories I wrote. Whose name suddenly escapes me.
Was it about like
I've written so many stories now that I can't keep track of them all.
Was it the one about the fox?
Cruel Nature. Cruel Nature was the title of that one. About a woman who is raped and impregnated by these sort of feral wolves, and she's kind of a civilized wolf. And then it turns out that her children are very much like their fathers. And that ends badly. But on the other hand, I also really like, sometimes I really want to write sweet romantic stuff, and a lot of my Phineas and Ferb stories and original stories fall into that category as well. Even Satisfaction, which is, you know, about a relationship between a mother and her 12-year-old daughter and her 7-year-old son, is really about them just.
Oh man, you gotta. That's a touchy one, huh?
And yet it's really, I mean, it's really about them loving one another and just doing so in an extremely unconventional way.
Let me ask you: are you familiar with ASSTR?
Yes, a good friend of mine, Al Chow, posts there frequently.
All right, have you ever heard of a writer named Gander Sauce?
I don't think so.
Now, Gander Sauce, me personally, not outside of DasXGooch, me and Gander Sauce personally have done several collaborations together. I mean, of course, when I say collaborations, I don't mean like we worked on the same paper at the same time. Mm-hmm. But say we had, like, say I had an idea, but he's a fantastic writer, by the way. He's fantastic. Like I need a link. I need to link him to the put him a link in the description. But Gander Sauce specialized in non-consensual and consensual, you know, acts. If you catch my drift. Oh crap! Let me see if I can thinking. Like, for one of his stories, he had Grandpappy's Ring. Grandpappy's Ring was a great idea. I'm gonna admit that I had a bit of an idea, like influence on that story, because I was like, hey, what if you have a premise of, you know, you got a grandfather that's dying in the hospital. You got a rich grandfather who's dying in the hospital, and the families, they're all after his freaking fortune. They don't even give a hell about the grandfather. So after his fortune, the grandfather like points out a kid who, this young kid who just like is enraptured by this really like fat black nurse, and the grandfather sends everybody else out except this kid, and he's like, oh yeah, you like Bertha, huh? It's like, here, take this ring. If you twist it and give a command, a woman cannot refuse it, type thing going on there. And so it jumps. It's that story. You should really check it out. I'll give you a link after the thing and put it in the description if I remember.
All right.
But yeah, it's that duo. Have you ever done like on that subject? Have you ever done like any collaborations with anyone?
I have not done collaboration per se, but I am doing a story trade with Al Chow, in which we each had input on the story that the other one wrote or is writing. The story I'm writing for him is called Activation Day, and he wanted a science fiction story. He wanted it to involve an 8-year-old girl who had adult-sized breasts, and he wanted there to be a romance between her and her father, romance and sex subsequently. Yeah. And I like this kind of thing because I find it interesting. It makes me work outside my comfort zone when I try to think of how I'm going to incorporate those elements into a story. At one point, I also had when I was on Ink Bunny, well, I'm still on Ink Bunny, but when I hit my first 100 watchers on Ink Bunny, I decided to have a watcher raffle, and whoever won the raffle would get to tell me what they would like me to write a story about. And so the winner had a character that was his called Leilaya, who was a humanoid dragon. and and a prostitute, and he wanted me to write a story about her, and he wanted it to include a foot job and double anal and nodding, and some of these are things that I'm into, and some of them are not. And
Yeah, I can
really,
completely agree with that. I mean, as a writer, you have to. I used to put out a disclaimer on my stories, specifically targeting like I might write about a subject. I might write about a subject from rape to underage prostitution and stuff like that. But it doesn't. But people when people like review my stories or review my stories and stuff, they think I'm in like they expect me to be into it. Like I had one review for one of my quickies episode where the guy called me oh my god, he said I lived in my mother's basement. I was like 300 pounds. I like masturbated with the Cheeto cheese sauce from it was it was retarded. He expected me to like. He said, "Oh, you like fucking ponies, don't you?" Like, because I've never actually written. I don't know why he said I like fucking ponies. I've never actually written a My Little Pony anything. I was like, no, I gotta put a disclaimer in. Just because I write about these things doesn't mean I write them. I write mostly for the what, like the. I started writing like weird and obscure things for the wow factors to see what reviewers would think or what people would think, because these subjects that I write about like underage stuff like that, no one really no one, it's like one of those taboo things you don't really see commented on, and I want people to talk about it. I want people to comment on it. Doesn't mean you have to like it. Doesn't mean you have to do this kind of stuff in real life. You just gotta. It also means that that doesn't mean I can't write about it either, you know.
exactly. And people, I mean, people who are reading this stuff, this is written for adults, and the whole reason why we restrict this kind of thing to adults is that adults are supposed to be able to tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And if you find that people are criticizing, I think people who criticize the content of a story simply because they find the fetishes that you are into or that you are exploring in the story offensive, they're missing that. I think they don't have a clear line between fantasy and reality.
Oh yeah, I mean, like for instance, I had a bit of a what do you call it? I'm not I didn't I'm not I should go on disclaimer, folks, for you don't for those who are reading and those future watchers and stuff. I am not a homophobic. I am no homophobic. But for a point from like 2012 to 2014, I didn't really like read, things. Not even that. I didn't read anything like I didn't or not it didn't stop at like male to male. I didn't read female to female stories either. I don't know why. I guess I just couldn't relate. Maybe I guess I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
relate to the story. I can't because with the story I gotta like relate to it. Like there's this story. There's a lot of like so like a lot, I gotta be able to relate. And I gotta be like, yeah, it's gonna happen. I mean, I read my stories kind of like how I watch my porn sometimes. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really like. I've never liked lesbian porn. I don't know why. I
Hmm.
just don't. I'm just not a fan of the whole like scissoring thing. There's no penetration. I can't relate to it. Because I'm not a female. I can't
Right.
thing. For guys, it just wasn't. It wasn't so much. 'Cause I don't. It's not so much. I'm not adverse to it. I just don't. It's just not for
It's
me.
just not your thing.
It's not my thing. It's not my cup of tea per se.
Mm-hmm.
But
And I totally respect that. And I'm always, I mean, with readers, I don't expect anyone who likes one of my stories to like all of the others because they cover such a broad range of subjects and fetishes that, I mean, even I don't like all of them all of the time. So I certainly would never expect that from anyone else. And I completely respect that if, people don't want to read a particular story of mine because of the subject matter. That's totally fine with me. That's what the story tags are for, so people can see that and know what's in there and know whether they decide, make an informed decision about whether they want to read it.
oh man, we could. I feel like me and you could like go talk about these kind of things for hours upon
Yeah.
hours. I just looked at my watch and we're clocking in over almost, I think, almost an hour of just talking about this, and I just want to, before we like wrap this up, I just want to, because I asked this Fairy Slayer the same question. What can you tell? What advice can you give to future writers or even current writers, like to write? Like what is your like what is your like what do you stand by? For example, for me, you gotta just follow four things for me. You gotta when especially when you're writing erotica, you can't do what I did when I first started and just write A, B, C erotica and then fit characters into the A, B, and C from a fandom. You gotta write erotica based. You gotta write when you write your erotica, when you write your sexual scenes, you have to keep in mind the characters that you're using. For instance, if I'm writing about Invader Zim, which I am, I can't have Gaz as like some soft. I don't know if you know who Gaz is from Invader Zim,
Yes, I do.
but I can't have her as some soft, like quivering, crying little softy pants. You know, I
Right.
can't do that.
That's not who
I
she
gotta
is.
write her in her personality. She's not so much like super domineering, but she's very blunt and she's very not so much very extremely violent, but she's like she can be violent and she can. I have to keep that in the character. I have to keep if I'm gonna write about like someone who's from an alien race or something like that. Who he's not gonna be like oh passionate. No, no, no. When you're writing, especially when I just got done writing that thing, you have to he has to for him his reasons for sex are not for passion or anything. His reasons for sex because it's an ends to a means. You know, if he can use sex to control his what he wants to do, then he uses it. For instance, if he studies adversity because he's an alien, so he basically downloaded information from the internet. You know, like information like on the G spot, whether or not it exists or whatever. And he knows. I think it's called the Gestalt spot or something like that. But he's researched that and stuff like that, and I wrote that in like then I found when I did my research, I found something I had no idea like because you just find new information that you didn't know. Like, did you know that when that the younger girls like from ages like I don't know from ages 21 down when they discover like masturbation they mostly stick to click they mostly only have clitoral orgasms basically meaning that they only orgasm from their clit
Yeah.
versus women who are like in their mid to late 20s or 30s and stuff they have vaginal orgasms where you can like that you can fist the crap out of them. You can fist the crap out. You gotta get an orgasm from that rather than clitoral. It's because Sigmund Freud called clitoral orgasm. It's a masculine over feminine orgasm. So quite it's quite crazy. But onto the back to the subject. What are your like? What would you tell writers to new
I think
writers?
one of the most important things is to figure out what your ideal process is for writing. Um, as I mentioned earlier, back when I first started writing these kinds of stories, I was producing them very slowly. And that was largely because I have attention deficit disorder. And I can't focus on a single task for an extended period of time very easily. And I finally realized that what I needed to do was make that work for me by, instead of trying to write one story at a time, write as many stories as I want to at a time. I currently, at any given time now, I have about 20 stories in various stages of development. And, that means that maybe any given one story may take a long time to write, but I'm producing something on a very regular basis. And I feel that enhances my creativity. That is not a process that I would recommend for everyone. I think everyone sort of needs to figure out what their sort of cognitive strengths and weaknesses are and adjust the way that they write to fit them.
I can see that. That's great. So would you say you say follow your process? Like would you say that don't be afraid to tackle a iffy subject, don't feel anxious to like Yeah, yeah. Don't feel. Yeah, I feel like I would say don't be afraid to write about a certain subject because you think it won't be liked. Because that's why we have our anonymity, so we have that shield to protect us
Yes.
from.
And
You know,
there were when I was starting out, there were some stories that I had written that I was reluctant to post because I wasn't sure that they would be well received, particularly on adult fan fiction where the audience is largely female. And so at one point, I decided to just suck it up and try it and see what sort of reaction I would get. And I posted the first chapter of Caitlin's Punishment, about a housewife who's forced to perform acts with various animals by her cruel husband. And it is the most popular story I've ever posted on adult fanfiction.
dude, let me tell you, my theory is that women are huge perverts. I want to say women are bigger perverts than men. Men are just more open about it. That's why they're seen as bigger perverts. But if you've ever heard of 50 Shades of Grey, if you ever like gone into your mother's like book collection and like just open one of those freaking novels with like a Fabio looking dude on the outside of it, it's freaking it's freaking erotica. It's just that's just what it is. They read
Oh
nothing,
yeah.
they read nothing but erotica. They're like huge perverts who just they're hypocrites about it. And they're just not out there about it. I mean, it's getting out there now, but they're not. It's always been seen as, oh man, they're perverts. They're always thinking with their cocks or whatever. Like it's not. It's not the case anymore. But it's a big thing. I think women are more perverts than men because a lot of my readers who I've gotten reviews from have been like women. You know, have been girls. So the ones I can figure out are women. You know, because not everybody reviews with their like name or whatever. But you have to like go into their profiles and see. But a lot of them are women. So I can see why adult fan fiction would be mostly women and like why your story would be popular because women love that crap. Women, you can write like bondage and crap and you know because women love that shit. They do.
I think there's within in both genders there is a certain subset of people for whom being victimized is an immense turn on, and I think that's why. I mean, with men, you have the whole cuckolding fetish or castration or shaming, all those kinds of things, and I think with women, rape and bondage are is kind of the same thing. Some people just really like the idea of being out of control.
I could see how that could be a turn on for people. I could totally see that. You know. Okay, we got. I think we've gone into depth and we've done a lot in this episode. This has been I feel like a great second episode. I don't know. I think I'm gonna post this. I might post this immediately after this. 'Cause I think as soon as you like stop broadcasting, it posts automatically or whatever.
Nah.
I think automatically. I don't know if I can. I have to go back and edit it and stuff like that. After I don't know the process. I'm still working on that kinks. But man, I want to just thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes. You know,
Well,
spread the word. Spread the word, man. Get it out there. There's a guy. Tell him there's a guy that's willing to like get you. The reclusive, the writers. Bring me the reclusive writers. The writers like that don't put themselves out there. That don't people don't know that they're writers. Like you can literally go your whole life without knowing that your next door neighbor is a fan fiction or erotica writer, that type of thing.
yes.
Me personally, I've had like I have so many effing aliases. I can't always keep up with them. My name changes like other freaking month, every other freaking year. I've been Marcus BC. I've been Marcus Carvalho. I've been been Marcus this and that and this. And it's just that's
Hmm.
I even went ballsy and I made like I love bucket hats because that's just my thing. And I had a bucket hat customly made with Das Gooch on the front of it. It's in one of my pictures. I think it's in my profile picture. And I was walking on campus because I live in the Bay Area. I walked on my college campus, and this girl recognized my hat. She recognized the logo on my hat, and that was awkward.
Oh, I imagine, yes.
That was awkward.
but but then the mere fact that she recognized it might have made it as awkward for her as for you.
Exactly. You know, because no one likes to admit. that they do this. I mean, everybody might masturbate, but not everybody's gonna admit that they masturbate. Type thing.
Exactly.
All right, that's
Well,
just.
thank you very much for having me on.
Oh man, no problem. You're like freaking legendary in my status. You're in one of my top 10, literally. You're like, I don't know. I think you're like number 4. If I can get Toonspew on here, number 3 and
Very
number 4.
specific.
If I can get Toonspew on here, man, if I can get Toonspew hit. I only ever read one of his stories, and that one story was like one of the greatest amalgamations of story, of plot. It's not like most of my stories are porn with plot. That story is plots and porn. I don't know if you ever read My Life as a Teenage Von Neumann Device by Toonspew,
No, can't say that I have.
but you must read. Go read that story. It's on. It's in the fuck. What is it in? It's in the adult fan fiction. My Life as a Teenage Robot. Uh,
All right.
like fandom. But you need to go read that story.
Hmm.
I'm glad I could have you on here. I'm glad. I hope whoever's like the 1 or 2 people that are actually watching this and listening to this right now have enjoyed our ramblings and our going off topics and all that good stuff and our talking about. And hopefully somebody can learn something from this and somebody can go like, man, I'm glad I watched this and listened to this today, because that's really the reason I'm doing that, to bring focus and attention to the writers behind the stories and the stories themselves. So I am Marcus BC of xXDasXGooch. This is George Glass, great George Glass, and this has been the Fan Fiction Writers Circle, which I might change that name because that is a long mouthful of a name. Thanks for being here. Thank you. This has been great. George Glass, George Glass.
Thanks again, Marcus.
Go read George Glass's work. George Glass needs to be spotlighted. I'm going to go put a link in George Glass's work in the description. You need to go watch it. You need to go read it. Enjoy. Thank you. And as always, stay fantastical. All right.